Are your challenges normal motherhood struggles because mom life is hard, or do you have ADHD? Today, we are going to talk through that specific question and help give you clarity as to whether or not you should pursue a formal ADHD diagnosis. I'm Amy Marie Han. I'm creator of Master the Mundane. I help moms with ADHD manage their home and their family. And if you have been wondering whether or not it is worth pursuing a formal diagnosis with ADHD, today I'm going to help give you clarity. I am not a physician, so I cannot diagnose you, but I hope to give you a ton of information and things for you to really think about as you look back on your life to determine whether or not this whole ADHD thing might apply to you. Let me just say that whether or not you have ADHD, motherhood is hard. It was not meant to be easy, but especially now with the added challenge of social media, and you can compare yourself to all these moms who seem like they have it all together, it has added such a different challenge. But if you have ADHD, the challenge is different. The challenge of motherhood is different in both the severity and the intensity. So what are the common struggles of those with ADHD? Well, what I'm going to do today is walk you through what's called the DSM, which is what a psychiatrist or a psychologist would use to diagnose someone with ADHD. Okay, so there's 3 types of ADHD. There is inattentive, there is hyperactive, and then there is combined. I'm going to walk you through the characteristics of the 3 different types, but as an adult, you only have to identify with 5 of those characteristics that would qualify you for a diagnosis. So another important thing to understand is context. So our brains like things that are challenging, things that are interesting, and things that are novel. So you might not struggle with these challenges in certain contexts. So in a work setting, or if there's a really interesting project or something that you really enjoy, it might be easy. But in other things, in the boring, mundane things of life, things that are really boring and interesting, that's where the red flags are going to fly and where these things are going to show up more in your life. So inattentive, let's walk through that. Okay, so the first one is often fails to pay attention to details or makes careless mistakes. This is like, I have so many examples of this in my life. I could go on and on. You get so close, but you miss one key detail. You might make an appointment and then show up on the wrong day. One time I delivered a meal for someone. It was like amazing. I had done the main course and a dessert and a salad, and I included the plates and everything. And then I delivered it a week early. Another time my son's 5th grade graduation, he did so great in school. I was so proud of him. He got the principal's award. He had straight A's. We were one of the first people there. He looked so nice. He was ironed his shirt and it was tucked in, but he looked so great. Well, it turns out that on the back side of the invitation, it said that he was supposed to wear a white shirt, a black pants. So that is you're get almost there, but then you miss a little detail. Okay. Then often has trouble holding attention on tasks or play activities. But for adults, it's the thing is, if you struggle playing with your kids, or even especially when they're interested in things that are super boring. My oldest was super into dinosaurs for the longest time, and it was so painful because I hated playing dinosaurs or even just reading the books. I would read these books over and over again about dinosaur details and not remember a single detail because it could not hold my attention. Even though I wanted to be there for him, I just couldn't force my brain to pay attention to dinosaurs and to remember all the details about where his brain could remember all the details about it. I could not because I just don't care about it. Often does not seem to listen when spoken to directly. And this could be 2 things. Sometimes I might look like I'm not paying attention, but I'm actually paying attention, because oftentimes if I have to look at someone in the eye, that makes it harder for me to pay attention. It's easier, especially if I'm moving. But also sometimes I could be totally zoned out. So I'm just thinking about something else and someone's talking to me and I'm thinking about something in my head and I might not hear what they're saying at all. So it can be both of those things. So often does not follow through and fails to finish projects or chores. Well, and this is I mean, it's that last 5% that's the hardest. How many times have you done a project in your house and then forgotten to finish or just lost your steam at the end because you've lost that dopamine rush? It's not as fun anymore. A year ago, we redid my daughter's bedroom, but there were these 2 little wire shelves that needed to be hung up. It took me a year to just get those. Everything else was done, but just to hang those 2 little shelves. So it's just like buttoning things up can be really hard. Often has trouble organizing tasks and activities. And I think that is really important because tasks and activities, you might think I'm good at organizing stuff. Like you might actually have a really organized sock drawer, but you might really struggle with organizing information. So in terms of even like calendars or time management, that's organizing, trying to order your life and have a plan and a routine and a structure. That's really organizing tasks and activities. So maybe you still struggle with organizing stuff because that could happen too, but you might actually be organizing, and that, especially for many of us, we lean hard into these coping strategies. So you might have learned as a coping strategy to be really organized with your stuff, but really struggle with activities. And especially the more kids you have, the more information that's coming at you, it gets a lot harder to make sense of that. Okay, avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to do tasks that require sustained mental energy. So some things I can, sit and I can I can hyper focus, I can lose the world, and because I'm really enjoying it, it's really interesting. Other things I always put off. So the budget, anything to do with updating the budget, I need a lot of accountability to do that because it is so boring and I hate it. The taxes, anything like that. Those are the things for me. So for you, it might be totally different. I love messing with a spreadsheet. Some people hate messing with the spreadsheet. So if you feel like it's something that you're not good at and you're going to have to focus really hard, it's something that you are going to put off. And we are really good at that. We're expert procrastinators. Often loses things necessary for daily life. So your phone, your AirPods, your keys, anything, things, if you lose things frequently, that is a big ADHD red flag. Is often easily distracted. So you're going to go in the room and not remember what you did, or you're doing something, you're making dinner and your kids are talking to you and then you totally lose track. You can't remember what happened. You're following a recipe and you can't remember what you last did. If you're easily distracted just by normal life noises, that's a big ADHD red flag. It's something I totally deal with. Is often forgetful in daily activities. And so this is where you think about the things that you do every day. So every day I get my kids in the car, we pack the lunches, we need the same things to go do our day. If you're having to come back in the house multiple times because you forgot the water bottle, you forgot the keys, you forgot the backpack, whatever it is, if you're just really forgetful in those things, it takes so much mental energy just to remember the basic things you need on any given day. That is a big ADHD red flag. It means your brain is working so hard just to do the basic things. So for hyperactive, again, remember from the list, 5 things. So the inattentive list, 5 things. If you identify 5 things, this one, 5 things, then you identify with hyperactive. Often fidgets with hands, taps hands or feet, or squirms. You might twirl your hair a lot. You might really do a lot of chewing gum, or something in your mouth, chewing on ice, sucking on candy, bouncing your leg a lot. It also can just be really hard to sit in a chair normally. I prefer usually to sit on the ground. I like to have my legs out. So just needing your body just needs to move a lot. Okay, often leaves seat in situations where it's inappropriate. I cannot tell you how painful it was when I worked in corporate America to sit in these day-long board meetings. It was just so painful. I hated it. And it's when I would always look for ways to get up. I'd always be like, who needs this? Do I need to go check on that? I'd find ways to get up because it was so physically uncomfortable for me to be sitting down for long periods of time. Often runs about or climbs in situations where it is not appropriate. So this one is less common, I feel like, in adults, but, and I think for most of us, we probably tend to mask it. But like my kids, if there's something to climb, my kids are going to climb it. always. And that was really embarrassing when my kids were young. The more I've really learned to understand this as a need of their ADHD brain and find ways for them to climb, that's gotten easier. Okay. Is often unable to take part in play or leisure activities quietly. You go to a party and there's kids like coloring quietly, and your kid wants to like run all around, or like they can't do that, like sitting quietly, that play. They just want to, that does not sound fun. But often I think just making noises. So even like for me, like talking, I lean into talking a lot because like if we're watching a soccer practice, it is so painful for me to just sit there and watch. I need to be talking. I need to be doing something with my mouth too. And my kids too, like if they're going to be still and quiet, they're going to be like humming or making noises. It's just hard to do all three, to sit still, and then, to not wiggle and to be quiet. It like feels impossible. Is often on the go, acting as if driven by a motor. This sounds weird unless you identify with it, because it's like, yes, 100%. It's hard. I can remember my mom saying as a kid, like, I just sat down for the first time today. And that's what it feels like. It just feels like it's impossible to sit down. It feels like you just have to keep going and going and going. And so I have learned to make myself sit down and get the rest that I need, but it's taken a lot of time because my normal speed is just go, go, go. Okay, often talks excessively. That doesn't need much of an explanation. My nickname when I was a kid was Mouth of the South. And it's funny because I didn't understand. And then now I have ADHD kids. All three of my kids are ADHD, by the way. They're diagnosed, as is my husband. And it's funny because now I'm like, they never stop talking. But they don't realize it. They are literally talking nonstop. And so as a parent now, I'm like, okay, now I get it, because I get that not every kid does that and that they don't realize it. And then often blurts out an answer before a question is asked. This can be complicated in social situations. It's just that our brains move fast and we're skipping ahead. Like we can see where people are going with things. And so it might seem rude, but it is amazing when you're talking to someone who's ADHD and it's like you can skip words together and they're moving really fast and you're like, get where they're going. And that's just the best. So when you're talking to people who also communicate that way and their brains move really fast, then it's a beautiful thing. Often has trouble waiting their turn to speak and frequently interrupts. Okay, this is so frustrating because we know we do this. We wish we didn't do it. It impacts our relationships. Like I can remember growing up being at the grocery store, and my mom, like someone would be like, "Oh, I'm looking for a new doctor." And they're like chit-chatting to themselves, and my mom would like intrude, and she'd be like, "Oh, you got to try this doctor." Whatever the thing was. She was always like trying to help people. And it was so embarrassing. She would like butt in these conversations. But that is ADHD. It's such a misnomer because it sounds like, we have a problem paying attention. But the thing is we pay too much attention to everything. We have a hard time filtering out what is for us and what is important. And so oftentimes we notice needs that other people don't. And often we bring tremendous value and are able to help so many people because we also lack that impulse control where someone might say, oh, that's weird. I shouldn't interject or I shouldn't say something. We don't have that impulse control that stops us. And so we're just going to, say whatever it is. And so oftentimes we end up helping people and having these really beautiful social interactions or even, random friendships. There was this movie, Planes, not cars, but planes. And not many people were into it. My son was super into it. He had all the little characters. And so we were waiting in line at Target and there was this mom, like 2 people behind, and her little boy was talking about all these planes, like little characters. He was talking about the characters. Dusty Crop Popper was the main plane. And so I was like, my little like radar went up and I heard her talking to her son. So I was like, oh, my son really likes those too. And she seemed like cute and normal. And anyway, so we're still friends. She is wonderful because of that connection, because I had that radar. I made this friend, and maybe that might have seemed weird to other people, but because of my ADHD, I was able to hear her and make that connection. So that is what it can often look like to interrupt, or intrude on others. Okay, and then combined type. Combined type is where both things are present. So you identify with the inattentive list and you identify with hyperactive list, the 5 things on both, then that would make you a combined, which is 100% what I am. I am combined. I think it is also important to talk about a few things that are really unique in women. Okay, emotional regulation. So this is important to understand because so many of us grew up thinking that our emotions are part of our personality. So we were told, we're too sensitive or we're a drama queen. But in reality, emotional regulation is controlled in the brain. So if you have ADHD, which is a neurological condition which impacts how your brain functions, emotional regulation is a huge part of that. And so it can look like having outsized emotions, so for example, like your kids spill something and logically, this is not a big deal. I don't really care, but you get really upset. A lot of people with ADHD might have like anger or rage issues. It can appear very volatile at times. It can also look being very sensitive. I have some kids who something happens and they cry really easily. They get really sad. That was probably more me, that I went more inward and would cry and get sad about something. So having these oversized reactions to situations in life, my family would call them big emotions. So something happens and the size of the emotion might not warrant the situation. So that's very common. The second thing is rejection sensitivity, where we are highly sensitive to rejection or even perceived rejection of others. And so this can, vary in different people. We spend a lot of time and energy, mental energy, worried about what other people think about us, afraid to make decisions that might impact others because we're just deeply, deeply afraid of any kind of rejection. The third would be perfectionism and anxiety, which I believe is really tied to that rejection sensitivity. Because if you are so afraid of anyone rejecting you or judging you in any way, that is going to lead to perfectionism because you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to make everything perfect. So no one can reject me. No one can judge me. No one can think badly of me. And so the result is then anxiety because you spend so much mental energy trying to make everything perfect. ADHD is commonly misdiagnosed as anxiety. It doesn't mean that anxiety isn't there, but it could mean that ADHD is really the root cause of it. So you really want to work with a psychiatrist to help you unpack that, whether your anxiety is rooted to ADHD. But perfectionism is actually the number one comorbidity for ADHD, the number one kind of co-occurrence. So many people think that if you're ADHD, it has to mean you're just this raging hot mess. When in reality, you might actually be very organized. People might look at your life and think, oh, she's pretty organized. She's pretty put together. But in reality, internally, you're struggling with this perfectionism, with this anxiety, with this fear of rejection. And these things eat away at your life. And I think a lot of the anxiety is also linked to, when you go back to that inattentive list where I talked about, dropping the ball on things, where you get almost there and you've spent your life dropping the ball. There's so much anxiety that comes from that fear that I'm going to miss a detail because I have missed so many details in the past, even though I spend so much time and energy and I really try so hard to be perfect. I do this thing. I drop the ball. I don't turn the thing over and see that they're supposed to wear white shirt and black pants. And so you're just so afraid and anxious about dropping another ball. Okay, moving on. Addictive tendencies. It's a fun one to talk about, but it is very common. And I think especially in women, the coping mechanisms of alcohol, leaning into that, especially if you have social anxiety, especially if you have this anxiety from this perfectionism, especially if you have this fear, all these things going on inside that you're afraid to really show up. And you have all this shame, feeling like you're a hot mess because you have made all these mistakes in your life. So addictive tendencies, highly linked to ADHD. It's something really important that you should tell your physician if it's something that you've struggled with. And then disordered eating. Extremely common in women with ADHD, but both overeating and then eating issues. It's all linked to the anxiety and the perfectionism, but then also just the basic coping mechanism of sugar, that many of us like sugar. Also, many of us have sensory issues and we just like having stuff in our mouth. So it can be complicated, but if you have disordered eating, if you've struggled with eating issues, this is something you need to tell your medical provider because it's something that is part of this overall picture of your mental health. In order to actually get diagnosed with ADHD, here's what they want to see. They want to see that you have struggled with these things for at least 6 months. As an adult, they're going to want to see some signs in your past of having these challenges. So they're going to want to hear some stories about where you can look back on your life and see these things specifically have showed up. But the biggest thing is they're going to want to know how these challenges have impacted your life. And that is what I think is so important to spend some time really reflecting on, how these challenges have impacted your daily life and then impacted the trajectory of your life. And I like to think in terms of, there's kind of whoopsie daisy mistakes, and then there are holy crap-a-moly mistakes. And so, for example, the story I told about my son's, showing up in the, cute plaid shirt and khaki pants instead of the white shirt and black pants, which I think he looked way cuter, by the way. Anyways, that is a whoopsie daisy. I mean, we laughed about it as a family. I told him, I'm so sorry, honey. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a whoopsie daisy mistake. We all make whoopsie daisy mistakes. We're all human. We all drop the ball sometimes. And then there's the holy crap-a-moly mistakes. So one time, can't believe I'm gonna tell you this. I'm gonna tell you. Okay. One time, this is my 20s, I planned a work trip for I worked at a small nonprofit, and there was 8 of us. And we were all going to California, from Nashville to California for this trip. I planned all the details. I booked the cars. I booked all the flights, booked all the hotels and all that stuff. Well, I, in my brain, got the numbers mixed up for when I was supposed to be there for us all to go. So they were all there, got on the flight. I missed the flight. I had a written out itinerary. It said what time I was supposed to be there, but in my brain, I got the numbers confused. And so I couldn't fly out that day. I had to fly out the next day, which means I then had to rent a separate car because where we were going required a car. So that was a holy crap-a-moly mistake because it impacted, our small nonprofit and, incurred this huge expense because I had to get a second car. It was incredibly embarrassing. So those holy crap-a-moly mistakes, it's we can think back, and even if you did well, even if you were organized, or even if you don't feel like you struggled, I believe you should be able to look back on your life and you probably have some holy crap-a-moly mistakes of this is how our ADHD impacted my life. And you think about kind of the different categories. Think about your career. How has those struggles impacted your career trajectory? If it's not a holy crap-a-moly mistake, it could also be a compounding. You had so many whoopsie daisy mistakes, but it's just this compounding thing where it's you weren't just late one time for one meeting. You were late so consistently that you lost your job because you were undependable. So your career, your marriage, your finances, your parenting, this, one of the things, I talked about the emotions, we can have these rage issues, but it can also be really hard to be able to stick to parenting strategies and really implement things effectively if you can identify how your ADHD struggles have impacted your friendships and your relationships. That is really important to note, because here's what this means. You might have done well in school or academically, but really ADHD impacted your life in these other areas. And that means it is impacting your life. It is inhibiting you from being the best version of yourself, from living your fullest life, because you deserve to have thriving relationships. The thing is, with ADHD, if your struggles are left untreated, they will derail you. They will impact your relationships, your finances, your career, your marriage, your family, all those things. But they do not have to. If you identify with these things I've talked about, if you're okay, check, I think I probably have ADHD, I highly encourage you to pursue a formal diagnosis. I want you to grab my free guide. My free guide, I have laid out exactly what to do, how to get formal diagnosis, as well as lifestyle tips that you can start putting into practice now to help you thrive with ADHD. I'm so glad that you chose to watch this video. Please share this with someone that you know that needs to watch it. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one.